My name is Trevin, and a few days ago the government put our little town on quarantine and locked out anyone coming in or going out. Now I don't really like people anyway, so at first the idea of being told to stay at home seems like a very welcoming option to me. They said it was some new strain of the flu or some other worse version of a common disease. I'm not really all that sure because, to be honest, I wasn't really paying attention to when they told us, and I don't even watch the news. I did, however, realize that I hadn't heard any rumors or anything else involving the discovery or potential threat of some new disease. This makes this quarantine feel very odd and very sudden, now that I truly think about how this all came about. What further increases how odd this seems is the fact that today I decided I wanted to grab an energy drink or two from the gas station on the edge of town. As I got in my truck and drove the 4 blocks to the gas station, I noticed that I was literally the only vehicle on the road, in the whole town. Once I got to the gas station, I saw military vehicles blocking off the roads out of town. Let me be a little more specific. There were 2 Humvees with roof-mounted 50 cal machine guns, but no troops, just the vehicles. I park in a spot as close to the gas station door as I can. This is easy in a completely vacant parking lot. I get out and try to go inside. Maybe I can ask the cashier if they knew more about what's going on. This thought suddenly faded as I walked inside the building to complete silence and emptiness. Now I don't mean it was some strange void that I walked into as I opened the main door. What I mean is that there was no music, no chattering, and absolutely no people anywhere. Not really sure what to do, I finally decided to grab the drinks I came there for, let the $5 bill on the counter, loudly announced to apparently nobody what I was doing, then left back out of the truck. Once I got back in my truck, set my drinks on the passenger seat, turned the engine over, I glanced back over to the military vehicle setting in their attempt at a roadblock, and that's when I first noticed that just beyond the Humvees was a curious dense fog blocking out my view of anything past maybe 10 feet from the vehicles. So from where I was in the parking lot, I guess there was maybe an eighth of a mile worth of visibility. I decided to drive over to the roadblock. Maybe I just couldn't see the soldiers sitting in the vehicles, and I couldn't ask them if they were able to give me any information about what was going on, or maybe the severity of whatever disease they had told us was going on. I backed out of my spot and turned off toward the roadblock. As I got closer, I noticed that the fog was not moving back the closer I got to it. It remained in place almost like a wall. I pulled up, stopped, and put my truck in park. Sitting only a few feet from the Humvees, I hesitated before getting out to closer inspect the situation. I didn't notice any soldiers asleep in reclined seats like I had expected to see as I got closer. Slowly, I exited my truck and walked between the 2 military trucks and toward the fog that oddly remained in place like some sort of swirling cloud wall. As I got within about arm's reach of the fog, a few little details about it sparked my attention. First was that it seemed to be emitting a sound, something like static or a low sizzle. Another note was that it looked like it had some strange sort of purple tint. Not really a tint, but more of a glow, just a faint sort of bioluminescence. Lastly, I decided to reach out, placing my left hand into the fog. As I expected, it felt no different than a cool mist enveloping my hand as it moved past the edge and into the fog. What I didn't expect was that it also had a strange sort of weight to it, almost like the mist felt heavy. One of the purple bioluminescent swirls floated over and across my hand, not feeling any different than the rest of the fog, but visually, I watched it happen, and it caused me to quickly recoil my hand thinking, okay, now I have a crazy story to tell my wife once I get back to the house. I guess that now is as good of a time as any as to explain a little more about me and my situation as this event started. I live in a small town, and I don't mean a small town. The total population of our town is maybe 800 people. To be honest, I feel like they included pets in that count just to make it sound bigger. The size is maybe 10 blocks by 12 blocks. It's one of those towns you can hold your breath and make it all the way through the town as you drive through. We have 2 gas stations next to each other on the edge of town, a video game arcade, a hardware store you can't walk into because it's owned by an old hoarder. So if you need anything, you have to tell him what you need and let him search the building to find it and bring it back out to you to pay for it. Cash only, as you could expect. No grocery store or any other type of stores, yet we did manage to end up with a McDonald's in town near the gas stations. I live about a block from our town circle in a 2-story house with my wife, Grace, 2 dogs, and 2 young daughters, an infant we named Izzy, and a 2-year-old we named Addie. Don't worry about us with this quarantine business, we should be good to go. We've got a freezer full of meat and lots of water and non-perishable foods stocked in the house. Now that you have an idea of how we are entering this whole ordeal, I'll get back to my story. Still standing there a mere few feet away from the fog, I looked back into our small little town and noticed that there was no fog at all any closer to the center of town than this. I jogged back to my truck and got in, backed away from the roadblock, and decided to drive the 10-ish blocks to the other side of town. As I drove through town slowly, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a shadow flash past as I drove past an alley. I stopped my truck suddenly and rolled the window down to peer down the alley, trying to see what it may have been. After about a minute and seeing no further movement, I rolled my window back up and continued toward the other side of town. Still moving through town, looking both ways down each intersecting street, I remained the only vehicle moving in the whole town. Once I got to the far side of town, I came to the same scene as I had before on the other road in and out of town. 2 Humvees sideways in a form of roadblock, no soldiers in sight, and purplish gray fog just past the roadblock. It was then that I noticed that there was still no sound, almost complete silence save for the sound of my truck, my breathing, and the sound of my own heart beating nervously in my ears. The lack of background noise was strange enough in the gas station earlier, but as I got out of my truck in the second roadblock, I noticed that there were no sounds of trucks or cars traveling on the nearby interstate. No birds, dogs, lawnmowers, crickets, nothing. The lack of ambient noise anywhere in town unsettled me enough to make the decision to remain in the vehicle for the remainder of my expedition around town in search of answers. I decided to drive around the edge of town curious about the fog, and as I drove my truck full circle around the town, I confirmed my fear. The wall of strange fog was surrounding our town and the same military roadblock at every road out of town. I drove back home, grabbed the drinks off the passenger seat, and went inside. As I walked in the house, my wife, whom was currently playing Barbies with her toddler and our infant crawled around the room exploring different toys lying about, said, "What took you so long?" Just then, realizing that all my exploring of the situation in the town had caused my short trip to the gas station for drinks had taken nearly an hour. "It's weird out there," I replied. "Something is very much not normal in our town." I continued to adding a look on my face to tell my wife that I had a story to tell her once we didn't have little ears listening. Catching my hint, she assured our toddler we would be back to play Barbies with her in a few minutes and followed me into the kitchen, where I was able to tell her everything I saw was going on while I had been out. She then tried to pull out her phone and make calls to her family. This act taught us a very interesting fact about our current situation. Oddly enough, we had internet, but somehow limited, as if there was some sort of strict parental control over our entire network. YouTube, Plex, Spotify, and Google seemed to work just fine, but the phone, Facebook, text, Kik, and any type of communication app did nothing more than endlessly load or wouldn't even open at all. No form of news seemed to be able to load either, so phones, tablets, and computers had been reduced to devices solely for entertainment. Together, we decided to do our best to stay in the house as much as we could until we understood more of what was really happening. This decision being made, she went back to play with the kids, and the dogs began to trail me around the kitchen as I began to prepare something for dinner. That night, after eating and getting the girls in bed for the night, my wife and I sat on the couch with some movie playing on the TV that neither of us were paying attention to, while we talked about the things that we had noticed when we glanced out the window during the day, and wildly speculating as to what we thought was really going on. After a while, and once the movie that we weren't even paying attention to finally ended, we decided to go to bed. Day 4. I woke up to my 2-year-old running in our bedroom, screaming at 6:30 a.m., "Daddy, Daddy, I want Cinnamon Crunch." Who needs an alarm set when you have little kids? I thought to myself as I sat up. Apparently it's time to get up, huh? Okay, let's go get you some cereal, I said to her as I got out of bed and began to follow my daughter downstairs while she rambled on about what she wanted to do today. "I want to watch a movie. I want my tablet. Come sit with me on the couch." As we got to the top of the steps on our way down to the kitchen, our littlest lets out a cry, announcing that she was awake now too. I told my 2-year-old that we would get to one thing at a time and that I'd meet her downstairs after I brought her little sister to my wife so she could nurse her. As I drop off the youngest to my wife and head back out of the room to get breakfast ready for our other daughter, I hear her yell to me as I reach to the top of the steps again, "Please make coffee, and strong." "I'm on it," I reply as I walk down the steps. As I reached the bottom of the steps, my jaw dropped as I felt fear rise in the back of my throat. I yelled to my wife to get downstairs and see this. Soon, I hear her moving upstairs, making her way with our daughter to the top of the steps and making her way down them. By the time she got to the bottom of the steps, I had moved over to the windows on the far side of the room. "What the fuck?" she exclaims as she hits the bottom of the steps. Looking out the window, the fog that I saw yesterday had crept into town. It swirled outside the panes of glass. The violet hints of color had become more of a pearlescence, like looking into a puddle in the summer that had bits of oil or chemicals spilled into it and shimmering rainbows of color as the light reflects off of it. Our visibility out the windows had been reduced to a few yards past the road. I could just make out the front door of the house across the street. "I told you something weird was going on," I said to my wife. "I told you it feels a little weird, kind of heavy, but I don't think it's dangerous." Beyond the swirls of the fog outside, I saw nothing out of the ordinary. Again today, however, I still didn't see any cars driving down the roads and no movement at all, really. So I walked into the kitchen, got breakfast ready, and coffee started as my wife remained looking out the window, searching desperately to find any form of normalcy in the purple rainbow haze our house had been engulfed in as we slept last night. As I gathered the various parts and pieces needed to prepare cereal for my daughter, both dogs wandered in the kitchen sleepily and sat staring at me next to the door, clearly asking me to let outside to do their morning business. Cautiously, I hesitated to look out the window and the door, unsure if the dogs would be okay out in the backyard in the fog. "Okay, make it quick. Shit's getting crazy outside," I said to Bodhi as I pulled the door open and let them both run out to the backyard to relieve themselves. Our 2 dogs are both 70 pounds, one boy, Bodhi, a pit bull, French Mastiff mix, and one girl, May, whom is sort of black-mouthed cur mix. As the dogs run out the door, Bodhi stops at the top of the porch, steps cautious to go out into the fog, but relents and quickly does his business and runs back to the door to be let back in. May, on the other hand, has no hesitation as usual and sprints out to the yard and takes her time, then finally returns. I hate to admit to using the dogs as guinea pigs to see if the fog was dangerous, but letting them outside was truly just that, a test to see if it was harmful. Thankfully, it was not, and our dogs are fine. When I opened the door, I once again noticed that there were still no ambient sounds outside, no birds chirping, no bugs. I decided that even though the fog seemed to be harmless, there was something very eerie going on, something that made all the birds leave and everything remain quiet. "Trevin, come here quick!" I rushed into the room where my wife is standing, still looking out the window. "Look," she says as she points over across the street. I look just in time to see a small orange glow fade off into the fog. "What was that?" I say as I step closer to the window next to her, trying to peer deeper into the fog to no avail. "I don't know. It looked like some small raccoon, or a small animal. A raccoon, maybe? But it was on fire, just running down the street," she answered. We both stood in awe, trying to look further into the fog to see it again, or possibly catch a better glimpse of what it was. As we stood there peering into the purple mist, our 2-year-old happily ate her cereal, humming along to what sounded like a Moana song playing in her head. Then we heard it, the first sound I had heard coming from outside since yesterday. It was quiet at first, coming from further away and heading toward our direction and getting louder. "Do you hear that? What is it?" my wife whispers to me as we both lean towards the glass, hopefully hear better. As the sound grew closer, it became more apparent that it was some excruciating animalistic scream, like the sound of a rabbit in pain mixed with the terrified screams of pain from a young girl. As the sound got louder and closer, it was enough to make our skin crawl. I noticed that it was constant, like it was being made with one long breath from something with infinite lung capacity. Just as I was about to vocalize my observation of the sound, my wife explains, "Holy shit, look!" "How we did?" "Ho we dit," I hear Addie repeat behind us as my eyes focus on what my wife is talking about. Just coming into view as it ran down our street was that small raccoon-sized animal still on fire. The animal was clearly not a raccoon, but about the size. It had 6 legs and moved with an almost elegance. The head was somewhat large for its body and shaped like an upside-down triangle. Protruding from its face were fanged mandibles that looked like the mouth from the creature in those Predator movies. It had a tail that looked almost lizard-like, scaly and thick. It had no fur, but had tight, dark, almost black skin, and completely engulfed in what looked like a fireball. The thing ran up into our yard toward the house, got halfway to the house, and changed direction. The fire following it the entire time, yet the animal didn't seem to even notice it. As it changed direction, it stopped for a split second and looked up toward our window. Our eyes met, and in that split second that our eyes were locked, my brain exploded with visions and my chest felt weighed down as if I had been kicked in the chest by an MMA fighter. Horrific visions of blood and viscera, torture and mutilation. Terrible pictures flashed in my mind. So many and so quickly I can never describe each one. Instantly, causing my head to ache and nearly causing me to collapse to the ground. As quickly as it happened, it broke eye contact and skittered off back toward the street. "What happened?" Grace said as she saw my stance shudder with the sudden psychological assault I had just endured. "That wasn't making the noise," I said, ignoring the question my wife had just asked, not knowing how to even explain what I had just experienced. To this, she realized I was right and turned back to the window just as another orange glow began to appear from the fog. This time, it was what was making the guttural screams that pierced our ears and almost hurt my heart to listen to. As it came into focus, it was a man. Tall and extremely thin, no hair, very unusual facial features. It looked like the skin was melting off his body, which in a way made a little sense because he too was naked and completely engulfed in flames. As he ran past our house, Grace and I stood in silence watching. The man, unlike the spider raccoon, definitely seemed to notice the fireball he was surrounded by, and the scream-like sound never stopped as he ran past our house. It didn't stop for him to take a breath or didn't change pitch, but it was definitely coming from this man. As we watched, it became clear that he was either chasing or hunting the other spider creature that had just ran past. He, however, didn't run into our yard, but continued straight down the street in the direction of the other animal. As he began to get far enough to fade from view into the fog, Grace broke our stunned silence. How about we close the blinds for now?" "Yup, good idea," I agreed as we both began to run around the house closing all the blinds. We spent most of that day leaving the blinds closed and pretending nothing was wrong, trying to keep the girls entertained. Only a few more times throughout the day did we hear the screaming or other unnatural noises coming from outside. And a couple times Addie questioned it, but we were able to keep her distracted by playing Barbies with her or having her dance parties in the living room. After the girls went to bed that night, we sat quietly by the window, blinds open, both staring out into the dark of night, watching, waiting, listening. After about an hour with nearly nothing said in between us, I broke the silence. "I'm almost afraid to go to bed after how much has changed as we slept last night. I'm not sure I want to know what will be different when we wake up tomorrow," I admitted as I stared into the night, the purple haze swirling just on the other side of the glass. "Well, we can make sure all the doors are locked and stay up all night looking out this window, but I'm not sure it's going to change whether or not things will change overnight," Grace replied, taking her turn to be the voice of reason. "Yeah, you're right. Let's go back to bed," I said, getting up to check the doors. As I approached the front door to check the lock, I heard another distant, animalistic scream emerge from the fog, almost as if to remind that this was far from over. We moved from our main floor to the upstairs, checked on the girls, and lied down, still both awake from the better part of another hour, laying in silence, just listening to anything coming from outside.